the young Africans who represent our future. I must commend the Policy Innovation Center for organizing this crucial dialogue at a pivotal point in our continent's development. As we reflect on the theme of this 2025 Gender Summit, from aid to investment, leveraging economic diplomacy for Africa's inclusive development, this high-level plenary has clear goals to show how economic diplomacy can drive inclusive growth by removing barriers for women, youth, and marginalized groups, to shape a gender and inclusive framework for economic diplomacy, to promote stronger collaboration among governments, business, and civil society, and to present practical recommendations that strengthen governance and empower vulnerable communities. If we pay attention to the trends in the diplomatic environment, we will observe that African diplomacy is increasingly focusing on creative solutions that cater to our unique needs, and Nigeria is playing a significant role in this shift. Africa stands at the cusp of transformation, with a combined nominal GDP of $2.8 trillion and a population projected to reach 2.5 billion by the year 2050, an increase of 67% in just one generation. Our continent possesses the resources, human capital, and creativity to drive global growth. Nigeria, as one of Africa's largest economies, occupies a strategic position in shaping this trajectory. There are, however, challenges associated with the actualization of the continent's full potential. And some of these are intra-African trade, for instance, accounts for only 18% compared to 59% in Asia and 69% in Europe. Africa also has 17% of the world's population, but only 2.5% of global exports. Women, who make up 70% of the informal economy, remain largely excluded from the benefits of formal trade. Just over two-thirds of girls, 69%, versus 73% of boys completed primary education in Africa, and a lower proportion, 43% of girls compared to 46% of boys completed lower secondary school, according to UNESCO's 2024 report. The report notes that 7.6 million Nigerian girls are still out of school, with the Northwest and Northeast accounting for nearly half of that number. African women hold just 27.3% of parliamentary seats and fewer than a quarter of executive positions in the banking and finance sector. In Nigeria, the percentage of women in the National Assembly is even lower, with just 4.2% representation. Indeed, a 2019 report by the Council on Foreign Relations, in it they say that, so this is the report titled Growing Economies Through Gender Parity. And they forecasted an astounding 23% surge in Nigeria's GDP, equivalent to 229 billion by 2025, only if women participate in the economy at a level commensurate with men. These statistics not only highlight the gender disparities in critical sectors that contribute to the continent's productivity, but more importantly, indicate that to fully harness the benefits of our growing population for economic growth, there's an urgent need to intentionally address gender disparities. The data further reminds us of a simple truth. Growth without inclusivity is fragile, and prosperity without equity is unsustainable. In light of this realization, Nigeria, as Africa's most populous nation and with immense economic potential, required a foreign policy with a fresh, all-inclusive purpose. This led to the recalibration of our diplomatic strategy, culminating in President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's 4D diplomacy agenda. This framework, encompassing development, demography, diaspora, and democracy, reimagines Nigeria's global engagement, ensuring each pillar prioritizes the inclusion of women and youth. As a direct outcome of this vision, our diplomatic efforts now include the Regional Partnership for Democracy, and this is a flagship initiative that addresses democratic challenges within the region by strengthening institutions, promoting inclusive participation, and fostering accountable governance. Central to its mission is ensuring the equitable participation of women and youth, thereby building sustainable and resilient systems that draw on the contributions of every demographic for Africa's political and economic stability. RPD, the Regional Partnership for Democracy, also takes into account democracy's variable geometry, which is essentially its different forms and speeds in different African countries. So we're not all applying the same type of democracy, and we're not all moving at the same speed. Earlier this year, Nigeria hosted the West Africa Economic Summit in Abuja, reaffirming our commitment to regional integration and harmonization of trade and investment policies to make West Africa a hub of shared prosperity. With heads of state, industry leaders, and development partners in attendance, the summit resolved to create an enabling environment for women's economic empowerment, dismantling barriers to finance, markets, and cross-border opportunities, while mainstreaming gender-responsive policies across all regional integration efforts. While we celebrate milestones such as the African Continental Free Trade Area and the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, these advancements risk leaving a significant portion of our population behind. The very systems designed to boost continental trade can become new barriers if women lack access to development finance institutions, DFI funding, financial literacy, and market networks. I must, however, at this juncture, confess that my opinion is that the AFCFTA is not meant to be a vehicle for achieving environmental and labor standards, gender parity, and equity goals. This is not the focus. This is not why it was created. All of these things should rather be left to the national level for nations to achieve. But I can expound further on that during the discussions. Our financial institutions, UBA, Access, Zenith, GT, First Bank, have expanded across the continent and beyond, financing cross-border trade, enabling digital banking, and laying the arteries of integration. Increasingly, Nigerian women are breaking barriers in this sphere, as demonstrated by the succession of female professionals serving as CEOs of some of our largest financial institutions. Yet, there's room for improvement, and this trend should be accelerated. Domestically, Nigeria is building strong policy frameworks for inclusion. In 2012, the central bank introduced the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles, which recommended that at least 30% of board seats and 40% of management positions in Nigerian banks be reserved for women. It was a clear signal that sustainability in finance must also mean inclusion. The National Gender Policy 2021 to 2026 embeds gender mainstreaming across governance and development sectors. The National Women's Economic Empowerment Policy and Action Plan 2023 to 2028 aims to enhance women's economic participation and financial inclusion. The INEC Gender Policy 2021 to 2025 seeks to expand women's political participation. True economic transformation depends on inclusive value chains driven by the private sector. This means moving beyond aid to investment that channels capital into women and youth-led enterprises, particularly in high-growth informal sectors such as artisanal trades, food processing, and the creative industry. By partnering with businesses and industry associations to provide targeted training and market access, and by directing investment into infrastructure that supports the informal economy, we ensure that growth benefits the very communities that form Africa's economic backbone. In terms of youth inclusion, Nigeria has launched several key initiatives. One that has existed for quite some time and that is under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the Technical Aid Corps, which deploys young professionals as volunteers to African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries, thereby strengthening Nigeria's soft power while providing valuable international exposure. The Nigeria Youth Investment Fund offers targeted financing to entrepreneurs, and the new Student Loan Act ensures access to higher education. In the same vein, the 3 Million Technical Talent, 3MTT program, trains a new generation in advanced digital skills such as cyber security and AI. Of course, on the private sector side, you have several business process outsourcing companies that are doing wonderful things as well. Distinguished participants, our conversation today is not just about identifying challenges, it is about committing to action towards truly unlocking Africa's potential. First, we must all work towards increasing and promoting the meaningful participation of women in politics. A 4.2% share of parliamentary seats is unacceptable, and this is coming from a former member of parliament. True democracy is about equitable representation, and we must dismantle the systemic barriers that prevent women from holding leadership positions, including through legal reforms that explicitly protect their rights to property and political office. Second, we must support the development of the Gender and Inclusion Framework for Economic Diplomacy, as well as the Purple Book of Action Plans 2025 proposed by this summit. We must also commit to leveraging its outcomes to ensure that every deal, partnership, and policy closes gaps rather than widens them. Finally, we must all remember that equity is not optional, inclusion is not charity. They are the foundations of a prosperous, stable, and sustainable Africa. I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tugar. Well, Honorable Minister, you will be chairing this high-level plenary, so we'll crave your indulgence, so please take your seat, and right after the plenary, we'll get your closing thoughts. Please let's put our hands together for the Honorable Minister as he takes his seat. This is indeed a high-level plenary, and he has set the tone for this plenary. Indeed, true democracy cannot happen without equitable representation. And Africa stands at the cusp of transformation. Nigeria is leading the charge with that. And to achieve all of that, we must ensure equitable participation of women and youth. Well, to moderate this high-level plenary, which is being chaired by the Honorable Minister, is the Executive Director of Policy Innovation Center. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, please let's put our hands together for Dr. Osasui Dirisu, who will be moderating this high-level plenary.
Your Excellency, distinguished guests, permit me to stand on existing protocols so we can go right into this very powerful, interesting, but critical session. Respectfully, I would like to quickly invite our distinguished panelists. Firstly, Ambassador Dapo Oluwole, Secretary General of the Conference of Speakers and President of African Union Legislatures. Please make him welcome as he comes. Thank you. I would like to also call on Professor Noel Tagoe. He's the founding dean of the Nile University Business School, Abuja. You're welcome, sir. And then also Ms. Thelma Ekiyo Sholanke, chairperson, the Nigerian Philanthropy Office, and SMENG. You're welcome. And then I'll also be calling on Ms. Ayodele Olojede, Divisional Head, Retail SMEs, Wema Bank. And we're also honored to have Ambassador Alfredo Miranda, Ambassador of Mexico to Nigeria. So the Honorable Minister has laid a very important foundation. There's nothing more to say, just to reinforce some of his insights. Growth without inclusivity is fragile, and equity is not optional. Inclusion is not charity. It's actually the foundation for a sustainable society. I'm going to start from you, Ambassador. I've discussed with you and learned a lot of interesting things currently happening in Mexico. How can African nations like ours leverage lessons from Mexico's policy to strengthen gender-responsive governance as we begin to think about how to advance economic diplomacy initiatives?
Well, good afternoon. First of all, allow me to start saying that Mexico is not country to give lessons to Nigeria. There is no way, because we are like-minded countries. We have similar development, and we are facing exactly similar challenges. So we don't believe in the situation. The panel names is moving from aid to investment. And we believe that aid is not anymore one way to support other countries. Is the area of cooperation, is an area of understanding, and to look for prosperity. What Mexico has achieved on these latest 8 years is quite remarkable, and allow me to say, use this word because I am the ambassador of Mexico and I have to say it, because we are living in an era of transformation in Mexico. The new era is based on inclusivity. What is the main goal of the Mexican government is to work in favor of the poor people. The slogan is say, for the well-being of Mexico, the poor first. And that's why we have developed a series of different social programs in order to give inclusion to the people. We have a universal pension for those Mexicans who are beyond 65 years old, and every 2 months, Mexicans are entitled to receive an amount of money of something like $300 only for being Mexicans, only for that, because it's a recognition of those who have been working along their lives and how should we recognize at this. We have different programs as Sowing Life. Sowing Life is a program devoted for rural areas where also the government provides a certain amount of money for development of a big number of plots for growing trees. This is something that we believe in the environment. We respect the environment, and we respect that rural person could also be employed and work in favor of these plots. We have scholarships for the secondary school, also the possibility for those who have left the university, a program that gives the chance to receive as an apprenticeship a period of time where the young people can be hired in private sector, and the private sector just will be teaching them, just testing how they perform the duties, but the government is obliged to pay this amount of money that gives the chance to have resources. So what I am saying is social programs are really important for the inclusion of people, because we have to see the problem in a holistic way. Not only social programs will resolve the issue, is because we are going to give the chance to enter into the economy and generate prosperity. At the end, prosperity will attract and give more capacity, just skilling labor force, and we are going to be in conditions to attract investment. What we are doing also, because Mexico has this free trade policy with since 1994 we started with the NAFTA and now named USMCA, plus 54 countries who have signed agreements for free trade, and we believe that this is an important access for our markets. So we believe that first the people, then give the conditions for macroeconomic situations. Mexico is doing pretty well in macroeconomics. So there was a taboo in the past. In Mexico, the Mexican private sector never accepted to increase the minimum wage because they say that will create inflation. In 8 years, minimum wage has been increased 110% without harmful the economy, without creating a problem in the inflation or unemployment. On the contrary, so there are more capacity for purchase goods, and this is another capacity. Thanks to these policies, the poverty has been reduced up to 29 million persons, where in 10 years ago, there were something like 50 million people living in the line of poverty. So how we can generate this transformation from aid to cooperation, to investment, to diplomatic economy is just sharing best practices. I think and I believe that Mexico, with all its own transit, with its own, we are not to give in any way lessons, but we are open to share our knowledge, experiences, and we believe that this is something that could help us. How to work with Africa?
Okay. Yeah.
Just closing remarks.
Yes.
How to work with Africa? Africa is because the multiculturalism, all the differences, we cannot talk about Africa as a whole. We need to understand them accordingly with their own agenda, the Agenda 2063, and we have to think how triangular cooperation can work together between different areas. Sorry, I have more to share, but I know that we have to respect the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really impressive, and it's good to see how some of these lessons can also translate to that free trade conversation in Africa. Coming to you, Ambassador Darkpo, just based on what he's talked about, and free trade was still at the center. You're not building prosperity for prosperity's sake. It's really to ensure that you can leverage economic diplomacy within continents and across continents. In your experience, how can cross-border private-public partnerships be structured to ensure that they are inclusive? So I know that Honorable Minister has mentioned the fact that the free trade policies cannot solve some of these problems. So how do we ensure now, how can we layer gender inclusivity, inclusive development upon the sort of partnerships that we currently see happening across Africa?
Thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon, everybody. All protocols are duly observed. Let me say it's a pleasure to be here again. I was here last year. I had the pleasure of delivering a goodwill message, and I have to commend you and your entire team for sustaining a very, very important and critical conversation. Secondly, I think it's only appropriate that I also celebrate someone in this room, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs. I've had the pleasure of working with 4 ministers of foreign affairs in my different roles across different arms of government, and I have not seen a clearer, more focused, more effective, and more intellectual voice of Nigeria on the international stage. And a round of applause to him. We are really lucky to have you serving us and leading us, sir. The title of our conversation today is really From Aid to Investment. And sometime in 2019, I had knee surgery from a teenage injury. And of course, it was quite painful, as you can imagine. I couldn't walk for a while. So the doctors gave me 2 crutches, which I aptly named Beavis and Butthead. In the first 3 months, the pain was excruciating. I couldn't do the normal things that a normal person would be able to do. And of course, I began to understand what it's like to be a person living with a disability. But with exercise and of course with physiotherapy, by the 3rd month, I fired Butthead. With more exercise, more physiotherapy, and more self-application, by the 6th month, I fired Beavis. And all of a sudden, I could walk and I didn't need the crutches anymore. Why do I tell you this story? When we talk about aid, a lot of people began to say aid is dropping, aid is dwindling, this is bad for Africa, this is bad for us. I tend to disagree. Aid is like Beavis and Butthead. It's a crutch. It was meant to help us at a time when we could not do what we needed to do as a people, as a nation. But as we move into 65 years of independence, we should not just be walking, we should be sprinting, leaping, and even backflipping, if that's be the case. And this is one of the things that the policies of His Excellency, the President, has actually engineered. So when they say aid has ended, I would say it has to end. What this does is that it now puts the onus on us to really focus on innovation and investment, which is exactly what this summit is about and what we should be focusing on. Now to the issue of PPPs. You know, one of the things we should bear in mind is that right from the outset, gender issues should be factored into the design, not as an afterthought and not as tokenism. And there are many different ways in which we can do this. First of all, if you look at the project design and assessment panels, it's important to have women in these panels. In my previous year in consulting at McKinsey at Palladium, we used to work on a lot of bids. And when you work on those bids, they will ask you, how will this affect a certain sector of the economy? How will this affect a certain demographic group within a society? Well, we should be doing the same thing when it comes to gender and ensuring that we have metrics that are built into this that can be monitored and evaluated and be used as a basis for determining who will be able to deliver the right outcomes, and not just outcomes independently, but also outcomes that will transform the lives of women. Another critical aspect of it is decision making. There's a popular saying that you should not shave a person's head, you cannot shave a person's head in their absence. We should rethink how we build when it comes to infrastructure. We shouldn't be building for women, we should be building with women. And what do I mean? I mean essentially we should make sure that women are part of the decision-making process in looking at how the infrastructure itself is designed. So for example, there are critical areas that we can think about. First of all, when you think about creating an enabling environment, we can look at hiring quotas. How many women are actually part of this process? We can look at childcare facilities on construction sites. In many instances, it's often said, oh, when it comes to construction, there are no women, the women didn't show up. Well, if we do not make the environment and provide the enabling infrastructure for women to work there, how are they meant to? Are they meant to leave their children at home? Possibly they cannot do that. So also is the issue of safe transport. And also having policies that will ensure that there's no harassment towards women. And quite importantly, when you are doing PPP and infrastructural development programs, there's often the requirement to do a social impact assessment. Well, we should have a gender impact assessment as well, and these are absolutely critical. I should also quickly mention that there is absolutely nothing that stops us from ensuring that we're ring-fencing a certain percentage of contracts for women, either in the construction, in IT, in service provision, and also in supply contracts. If we want women to participate and women to be involved, we have to be intentional and deliberate about creating the space for them to be able to do so. And we have a lot to learn from Ghana's gender procurement model in so doing. Finally, let me talk about legislation. You know, policies are temporal. When a government changes, the policies can change. So really, we tend to look only at the executive arm of government, but we also should look at the legislative arm of government. And the only way in which we can ensure that women will be included on a substantive and sustainable basis is to ensure that it is actually written into law. Now, I represent the umbrella body of speakers and presidents of Senate across Africa, and we have an initiative called WRAP, Women's Representation in Parliament. Why do we have this? We are trying to ensure that women actually have a voice in making legislation, because if women have a voice in legislation, then they'll be able to drive women-friendly legislation as well. And not only that, we're also looking, how do we create a Pan-African women-friendly legislative agenda? If we're able to do that on a Pan-African scale, I honestly do believe, not just in terms of infrastructure, but in every aspect of social, political, and economic life, we can have the right policies and have the right legislation that can really unleash the capacity of the many wonderful women in our country and in our continent. I thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that. I mean, I love the idea of a Pan-African women legislative agenda. That would really be powerful if we can pull that through. Yeah, thank you so much. Coming to you, Thelma, you do a very important work at the Nigerian Philanthropic Forum. Now, what role, I mean, now we're talking about moving from aid to investment, and it's clear it's not sustainable to continue to think that AIDS will continue. And AIDS is really not a freebie. There are conversations that go on even behind provision of aid. So we should actually even shift from that mindset that aid is truly free. Now, in negotiating conversations around driving philanthropic capital, how can we ensure that we are also amplifying the voices of marginalized voices? Because sometimes when you move to that investment conversation, there is the fear that in those negotiations and investment conversations, we may actually have to put the marginalized voices out of the room to ensure that we maintain the bottom line. How can we ensure that we have the best of investments, but the best of inclusivity at the same time? Because that's the only way we can now bring this integrated conversation about inclusive development to light.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation again this year. Extremely important question. The thing is, when we talk about inclusion, there is the immediate assumption that it should be numbers. And numbers are a good start. But when you're talking about the roles that philanthropy can play, it should go beyond numbers to the quality of the inclusion. And that's where philanthropy is important. Philanthropy can support in providing, for example, trade literacy. There's a lot of talk about AFTA, but do people really understand what it's about, what it does, the different laws that in all the countries? Everyone wants to export, but all the laws in Africa are disparate. There's not much alignment. Of course, there's some progress in the AFTA now. And so the quality of the participation is important. It's not just about, there's a lot of focus on women as well. It's not about just getting women into the room. What do they contribute? How do they have the requisite policy analysis skills? Are they able to, it's not about talking for 30 minutes. In the 5 minutes that you speak, do you say the most important things that you need to get across? And I think that is the work that a lot of traditional investors don't do, but philanthropists are able to do. If you look at this event, for example, the headline 3 names are 3 philanthropic organizations: Gates Foundation, Ford Foundation, Luminate. So philanthropy also plays a very, very important role in convening power, investing in bringing the right players together. Also, philanthropy plays a role in supporting voices. You talked about marginalized voices. A lot of the spaces where decisions are made, it's usually, it's the usual suspects, right? It's people who are very high level and often making decisions about grassroots realities. Philanthropy can play a role in supporting delegations to be physically present in those, for example, the WTO deliberations, or AFTA, or the African Union. You can actually make sure that marginalized groups are there. Lastly, I've been listening to the conversations since I've been here all afternoon, and it's been about including women. And that's important because the natural default is it's usually women who are excluded, but gender means women and men. And I think also to broaden the conversation to say, are there spaces where men are excluded? There are so many organizations, particularly in the international development space where I work, that have all women staff. I think that is also a problem, because if we're really talking about gender, more and more spaces are becoming spaces where we should also talk about how do we ensure that men are not left behind, because there's a lot of focus on women. And ensuring that gender is truly descriptive of women and men. Lastly, there are 2 ways to look at what has happened in the global international development space when it comes to aid. On the one hand, like Ambassador Dako said, yes, it made Africa sit up, right? But the question is, are we ready to sit up to play the roles that we need to play? Everyone talks about the importance of an ecosystem to support things like trade, to support inclusive investing, but the ecosystems, not just in Nigeria, in most African countries are weak. And there's not a lot of investment on ecosystem building. And so that's where philanthropy comes in. Philanthropy is extremely necessary to catalyze ecosystems, make different players come to the fore, and most importantly, to invest in policy development. We all talk about policy, but it's not really something that receives traditional investment. And philanthropy can come in to liquidate the policy environment. For example, there's no policy in Nigeria on philanthropy and impact investing. It doesn't exist. My office is involved with the National Assembly to create the first ever legislation on philanthropy. But the only reason that we want to do that is to incentivize the entire ecosystem. So those
I think that's a good place to clap.
Thank you so much. So those are the different roles that philanthropy can play.
Amazing. I think this is really important. You've spotlighted the importance of ecosystem building, because really there's a lot of collaboration that is needed to pull off a philanthropic impact investing.
Yes.
Thank you so, so much. And bringing marginalized voices, whether it's men, women, persons with disability, into those conversations. So I'll come to you, Prof. From your wide experience working across Africa, how can our governments in Africa begin to embed conversations around inclusive development into bilateral and multilateral trade agreements? So beyond discussing what it means to come together to build very powerful either infrastructural projects or development projects, how can we also ensure that across Africa we are putting the conversation of inclusion on the table?
So thank you very much. In terms of the way we think about inclusion and things like that, my first thing is just we need a mindset shift. Often around the tables when people are negotiating, we see inclusion as social policy related to trade policy or economic policy, and we don't see them as things coming together and working together. And the tragedy is that trade policy and economic policy gets all the resources, the residue goes to social policy. So if you're classified as social policy, you're not going to get a lot. And so the first thing is a mindset shift so that we regard inclusion as social policy if we want to, but also as economic policy. Because social policy is economic policy, and economic policy is social policy. So that's the first mindset shift I want to draw attention to. And the other thing that we need to talk about is to begin at national level before our negotiators go into bilateral or multilateral trade negotiations to legislate participation, meaningful participation of marginalized groups in there. People will change if they see that their current behavior poses a risk. And then the third one is people will change if the new behavior presents an opportunity to them. Often, the opportunity side is not seen because they've not lived that experience. They don't have that exposure. And so what prevents them from having that experience and that exposure will be rigid biases, etc. that is there. And you've got to break through that biases. Often the risk side is also not dialed up for the same reason. But compliance creates a catalyst for that. At least compliance forces people to do something. Now once they start doing it, they find out that it's not bad after all. Let me give you an example. Several years ago, I was teaching at a university called University College Dublin. And we had to move from manual systems of teaching into what we call multimedia and now digital type of teaching. One of the professors actually took the university to court saying that his contract of employment had been fundamentally changed. And it took me one day, I was walking past, he was walking past my office, and then he raised the issue with me. So I said to him, can I go and show you what this thing is? And when I showed it to him, he experienced it. He found out that it made his life even easier. And once he did that, he took the case out. So we need avenues of getting people to experience the fact that inclusion doesn't kill us. It rather enhances us. And I'm saying that the issue of compliance does that for me. So how would I do that? Number one is that I'll insert binding gender and equity provisions in every agreement that we have. And these are not just, if you like, what we call apple pie and motherhood kind of provisions. They are things that are specific that we can monitor. The second one is building, if you like, meaningful institutional mechanisms for us to be able to ensure that marginalized voices are heard. And that means that marginalized groups have a seat at the table. My colleagues have said that throughout, that I cannot speak for women. I understand to some extent what they feel, but I cannot speak for women. And I don't think women will want me to speak for them. I want to share solidarity with them. I want them to help me to know how my behavior blocks their access to the things that they should have and how my behaviors could facilitate that. So we want to be able to have people like that. Just as an African, I do not accept a white person understands my existential experience as an African. So those are some of the things. And then really, last thing I would say, two things I'll say really, is make sure that we have impact assessment, but then the final thing is put money there. Put money there. Because for meaningful participation, you just don't say we want to participate, we want people to be consulted and things like that. And the consultation is done in opaque language, and then the tools and resources that are needed for consultation are not done. So those are some of the things that we
Thank you so much, Prof. I think legislating meaningful participation for marginalized groups is critical. So not paying lip service, putting money where, amount is. And coming to you, Ayodele, I would just like to wrap this up, this first conversation, by asking the big question in the room. I know everyone is talking about private sector, private sector, private sector. So what's the role of private sector in all this? And as our Honorable Minister has said, there's a lot of, we see that expansion, for example, of Nigerian banks across Africa. So in this conversation around moving from aids to investment, what role do you see the private sector playing here?
All right, thank you very much. Once again, excited to be here and taking part in this conversation. So the private sector have they have very, very pertinent role to play. And I say that because inclusive development is smart. It is not about charity. I think the role that private sector have always taken, or the approach has always been in the context of just providing charity, throwing money at a problem, hoping that that would solve the problem. Well, sometimes it does, but it has never been, or charity would never help us to be able to achieve a sustainable solution to some of the issues that we're talking about today. So inclusive development, it's about unlocking latent opportunities that create hurdles for women, for youth, for rural communities. And the approach would be for private sector to begin to treat it as investment, to begin to take measured risk, to begin to throw private capital to solving problems. Now, sitting here representing Wema Bank. Wema Bank is a private organization, and I'm just going to give a few examples of how intentional Wema Bank has been in, being inclusive in the context of gender, youth, and rural communities. I think there was a plenary session that held earlier today where the Yaloja challenged, banks, and although I've had time to engage with her, but I want to just share a few examples. The first one is that issue that you talked about. Wema Bank sat with women in the market. It was a program that was facilitated by Lagos Business School and funded by Gate Foundation. And we were able to come up with a cluster lending product to be able to lend to women in the market, leveraging the existing Isusu system. What that means is that we know that they don't want to come into bank. We've had a lot of panelists talk about how intimidating maybe even the banking hall can be. I recall that she said they wear their suits, they sit in their offices, and not come out to be able to help. But that's something that we have turned on its head, because we went into the market, we worked with a partner that is committed to inclusive development, and already that is a program that we're running supporting women through the existing thrift system. Earlier on you said that when you're developing a program, you need to bring the women in. And so what it is that we did was that we went to sit with them. We sat with them to understand their own ecosystem. And in the understanding of the ecosystem, we plugged into their ecosystem to even be able to make it better. So the approach for us from Wema Bank in solving or providing solutions to inclusive development has been one that we have bundled with capital access, confidence, as well as a capability-enabled ecosystem. I would also say that in the context of rural community, Wema Bank is partnering with the Federal Ministry of Women, to be able to provide vocational services in agriculture, digital literacy, financial literacy, to about 500,000 women across 774 local governments in the country. We've already done the one for Kano State, and we're currently engaging with Ekiti State. Today, Wema Bank, we have a digital platform where women, if you go there to apply, by virtue of the information that you provide, there's an algorithm that have been built into it, configured into it to be able to recognize that you're a woman. And automatically, it would expose you to the concessionary pricing that we have built into it, and also bundle a solution on health management solution that gives you free, that helps you to access free medical, that gives you free medical access to some hospitals, and for you to be able to get drugs free. So I'm just highlighting some of the work that Wema Bank is doing as a private organization in being able to facilitate inclusive development. One that we're also very proud of is how we are also working with the Office of the Vice President to to facilitate and provide platforms for philanthropy, which is Thelma here is the chairman of the Nigerian Office of Philanthropy. And the platform is called I Feel. What is it that we have done? We know that people in diaspora always send money home to their families to help them to be able to run businesses. And what we're saying in this context is that we are providing a platform that would allow you to be able to, allow the country, even as a whole, to structure such donations to making sure that they go into segments of the economy that can accelerate job creation. And the metrics that we have, they've also been very intentional about in driving. It's about job creation, how your business is growing, how many women in the rural communities are able to scale. So coming together, partnership, collaboration.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I have to pause you here, but thank you. Please, let's give her a round of applause.
Okay. Now
thank
you do not
so
let
much.
me see everything that we are doing. Yeah? But it's okay. Thank you.
I mean, Thelma, you said you were going to, just in a minute.
I think Ayo has stolen my thunder. I was going to say that, but Wema Bank does an excellent job. One of the questions about unlocking capital is that there's a lot of local capital available. The question is, how do you unlock it? How do you move financial institutions, the private sector, from typical CSR to strategic philanthropy, or investing in social impact with returns? That conversation needs to take place, because the old thinking of CSR, you build a well, you do this, it does not move development. It is not catalytic. And we were able to, through a very generous grant from Wema Bank, create the first ever Nigerian philanthropy platform that democratizes philanthropy. You can give us
so let's give it up for Wema Bank and the Nigerian Philanthropy Forum.
But very importantly, because if she watches this, we were then able to partner with NIDCOM, the Diaspora Commission, because we all talk about 20 billion coming in from diaspora financing, but nobody knows how to unlock that for development. But through this platform, already Nigerians in the diaspora are giving towards job creation. So the key thing is, how do we unlock the capital that is available rather than constantly looking for aid?
So how do we unlock the capital that is available? Because of time, we have to stop. But I'll ask Dapo and Ambassador and Prof, in one sentence, how do we unlock the capital that is already available? In one sentence, please.
Just make sure that you're credible, you know what you're going to use it for, and you have maintained relationship with people. But also people should understand the danger of not doing anything, because if you don't do anything, the youth of today, research shows that where they feel we have been unjust, 53% of them are willing to use hostile activism to get their way. I just leave you with a South African saying. It says that the poor cannot sleep because they are hungry. The rich cannot sleep because the poor are awake. Now, if we want that to happen, then it's up to us.
Thank you. Okay, Dapo, in one sentence.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would say that honestly, what we have to do is, this is a holistic challenge for all of society, and we need an all of society approach. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we need to work not just with the executive arm of government, but with the executive arm of government, with the legislative arm of government, with civil society, and the private sector. It will take all of us working together to be able to do it. But fundamentally, at the heart of it is a mind shift. A mental mind shift that makes us ensure that women are not seen as an afterthought. They're not seen on the periphery of political or economic decision making, but at the very heart of it. And that if we do want any of our initiatives or our investments to be successful, we cannot do it without having women as part of that process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ambassador, in one sentence, how do we unlock capital that is already available?
Mexico stands ready to work with African countries and to generate more cooperation, not only for trade and investment, also for empowerment of people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As we round up, I would like to invite Honorable Minister to just give us your closing thoughts. And while we wait. Okay, yes. Yeah, we'll stay to take a photograph, yeah.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, Honorable Minister of State for Health, and the panelists. Let me, on behalf of everyone here, thank you for the very engaging, very interesting discourse. I was following the discussions keenly, and with mi hermano, the Mexican ambassador, I took note of how he explained what is going on in Mexico, which is very, very important for Nigeria because we share a lot in common with Mexico. He referred to the era of inclusivity and the putting the poor first, which is a bottom-up approach, which for us here is also very useful, and the universal pension scheme, secondary school scholarships, apprenticeship for universities, and of course the continental free trade area, which has been expanded. So this is, there are lessons to learn there. With the Senior Special Assistant to the President, Mr. Oyewole, he talked about aid as a crutch, which is quite important. Gender should be factored into the design and not as an afterthought. and this is very key. But at the same time, while he was saying that, I was thinking, okay, sometimes we have gender factored in. I remember encountering, but this is in politics, in partisan politics, I remember encountering a man who presented himself as a women leader. But thank God this was not APC. It's not my party, but these things happen. So it's been designed, but then at the same time, you have a man taking over the position that was designed for a woman. He also talked about, okay, so again, here, I was thinking we have to be careful also whilst designing some of these things, because yes, it's important you factor it into the design, but then sometimes there's abuse when it comes to design, because in certain parts of the world, it's not happening in Nigeria, and hopefully it will not happen. You find situations where there are huge sums to be accessed for ESG. And in order to access those funds, you have companies, let's say an oil company that's operating an oil platform, will just go to the platform, fire half, employ women. They might just be employed, just to fill the slots, and that allows for them to be able to access the funds. And that's certainly not what we are looking for. So that's why what Dapo has said is very important, factoring it into the design, but making it also organic so that it works. And it's not just a way of, complying or accessing funds. And that's why he talked about also legislating and so forth. Ms. Sholanke talked about inclusion. Should not just be about numbers. Yes, this is it's all about what I was saying also earlier about it being organic, and the fact that philanthropy plays a role in bringing people together. This is very key. So essentially, the convening power of philanthropy is something that we should take advantage of and harness. And also using philanthropy in investment and development policy, which is key. And if you look at what is happening in some Middle Eastern countries where zakat, these are Muslim countries, zakat is actually not just it's not controlled by mosques or religious organizations. It's being controlled by government, and the funds that accrue from zakat, or if you like tithe, so instead of churches and mosques or religious organizations controlling those huge sums, that's another pool of resources that can be tapped into. But we looked to the future. Dr. Noel talked about resources that go to trade and economic policy and not social policy, and I couldn't agree with you more, because we in foreign affairs face the same problem. Not enough goes into foreign policy, so it's all about how much revenue is the ministry or department or agency generating, and that forms the hierarchy and the emphasis on how much resources goes into the policy. So it's very important, social policy. And he talked about compliance as a catalyst for change as well. Ms. Ayodele touched on the issue of inclusive development and latent opportunities. So essentially, bottom-up approach. And this is very key, because you can see what President Tinubu is trying to do with local governments, which is why he instituted that court case at the Supreme Court as a way of bringing about changes in the funding of local governments. And then the next step, of course, would be reforming elections also at the local government level. And really, if we want to get this right, this issue of inclusivity, it has to be from that local government level. And of course, she talked about women in the market, market women, clustering, lending through a cluster approach. And this would allow us to tap into the huge sums of gray capital that exists, that is not recorded. So even the size of our economy, if we're able to formalize that gray capital that is there, you see a lot of women with investments, with capital, but it's not recognized. Women that own restaurants on plots of lands, and they don't hold the title deed. If they did, then they'll be able to borrow against that and invest further. And this is not just women, it's society as a whole. There's so much gray capital in countries like Nigeria. So really, this should be the approach. That bottom-up approach is key, and tapping into the gray capital. And how we unlock capital that is already available. That is not even the gray capital that I was referring to. Credibility, an all-society approach, and what we're doing, foreign policy, partnering with countries like Mexico. So the work is cut out for us. Let's go and do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that powerful summary, sir. Please, if you can just hold on for pictures.
Please, can we give the Honorable Minister and the esteemed panelists a huge round of applause? That was a very insightful conversation. Thank you very much. So they're going to take group photos right now while we prepare for the next plenary. So the next plenary session is a national dialogue on transforming gender norms for adolescent health.